So the thing is, this is really a good study. This one verse is a great study on understanding that looking at the outside of a person's lifestyle is no way to assess whether or not they have life in them. There's no way to tell that. And there's no way to tell the reason. God can take one person, give them wealth, and there will be a spiritual aspect of them that flourishes. God can go to another person, offer the same thing, and that person will be the exact polar opposite, all and out wicked, doing everything that is wrong. You know, who can tell? But if you are a Christian, and I'm sure most of us here are, if you are a believer, everything, you need to understand that whatever comes your way, whatever happens to you, look at it as a blessing from God, because it is, and it has to be, and it only can be. Whatever ill things that we look at in the world and say, this is bad, this is, for you, it is a blessing. Maybe for the wicked person, it may not be so good. But for you as a believer, everything that happens, from the lenses of man, whether it be good or bad, if it happens to a believer, it is for his good, one way or the other. And that's what you seek God for in that situation. How do you want me to handle this? What do you want me to do? Show me how this blessing is going to work. That's maturity as a believer. Sister Ashley, it took me a while to get to you, but go ahead, sister.
Well, so let me take it back. I just think it's so good, like how you mentioned, when somebody's going through something, it is not our first mind to say, you are so blessed in that.
Mm-hmm.
And can you hear me better? Because I am on the road.
Nope, I hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So with like, there's the verse that, all these things, we gain perseverance, right? And it takes a lot of perseverance to get to the mentality where we're like, we are blessed in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes with maturity. And as we do mature, I think that is an awesome idea to see the next person struggling and maybe they're lacking the length of walk or the length of faith or whatever it may be, to just reach out and be like, do you know how blessed you are to go through this?
Right.
So
Yep.
I really am glad that you made mention of that, because I will absolutely do that moving forward, because it's the truth.
Yep. Yeah, I'm telling you, Christians, if you really want to take your maturity as a Christian to the next level, get there on this, knowing that everything that happens to you, with whatever the world thinks is good or bad, you look at it as a blessing, even if it is the worst thing you think could have happened to you. Whatever it may be, health related, job related, marriage related, whatever it may be, you need to understand God ordered it. You are a Christian. All things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. Everything that he does is his purpose. So that means that everything that happens is for you, which is another reason why we can't go along with this whole idea that God simply just allows things, but that he orders the things that he allows. The things he allows are the things he ordered, like Mac and I were exchanging about. So we need to understand that if anything was to happen apart from God, accidental, something that snuck up on God, we can't be sure that everything works out for our good. We couldn't say that. But the only reason we can say that is because God is in charge and in control of everything that happens. That's why we have that certainty that all things work for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. All things means everything, and everything means all that God has ordained. That is everything, because that is the only way we can have that guaranteed promise that we will never be forsaken. Never be forsaken. and that everything works for our good. Everything. Brother Pat, go ahead.
Is that why God can be called a rock?
Absolutely. That's why he's called the rock. That's exactly right. Absolutely. Unmovable. Or is it immovable? Sister Mariah.
You guys made me think of something like, how people say that, you can sell your soul or give it to Satan or something. But when you were just talking, Satan is not concerned with our soul. What he's concerned about is having us curse God to his face if he takes or removes or does something that we deem unfair or whatever, or something that we don't understand. His sole mission here, and I don't think that he changes. There's nothing new under the sun. So he's constantly, during these trials and tribulations or sufferings and afflictions that we have, trying to get us to curse God to his face. That's what he wants. He wants you to do it yourself, not, anything else.
That's right. And, and I was going to say earlier about that hedge, and I got sidetracked, as I often do, that, God had this hedge around Job. And one thing that I talked about early on when we were discussing chapter 1 is that the real hedge around Job was never removed. The real hedge was never removed. God never left Job, and Job never left him. But the hedge is something that Satan believes that this hedge that Job has around him is the prosperity that God gave him. And so, but here's the thing. Some people view the hedge being being Job's life. People think, a lot of Christians believe that the hedge that God had around Job was the preservation of his life. But here's why I say that can't be the case. Because what Satan wanted Job to do was to curse God to his face. Well, Job can't do that if he's dead. You see what I mean? Job can't curse God if Satan takes away his life. If God allows Satan to take away Job's life, Job would have died the way all Christians die, as believers with God, and they go to be with God. Satan needed Job to curse God to his face, and he believed that the only reason that would not happen is because God has given him so much blessings. So the hedge is not about Job's mortality, his mortal life, because Satan needed him based on the deal between him and God. He needed him to curse God to his face. You need to be alive to curse him. After you die, you can't curse him anymore. It's over. But so Satan needed to get Job to do something outwardly and openly to express his disdain for God while he was alive in his flesh. And remember, Satan had to get to the Lord Jesus before the Lord Jesus got to that cross. He was doing everything he could to keep Christ from going to that cross. Now that's a whole nother discussion to have about that. But we know what happens when Christ gets to the cross. We know what happens to Satan when that happens. And so we need to understand that the real hedge around Job is his relationship with God, his relationship with God, his faithfulness that he has to God, that God gave him. And so the long and the short of it is this: we need to understand that when it comes to our souls, our state of affairs in a spiritual setting, we are, like Pat mentioned, God being a rock. Because God is our rock, we are immovable. We're invincible. Absolutely invincible. Nothing can happen to us that God hasn't ordered, and there's nothing that can happen to us that God will not carry us through. Everything works good for us, however we view it. It is a blessing to us, whether it be good or bad in our eyes. It's a blessing that we need to find what it is. Because we are conditioned to think that the accumulation of prosperity and earthly wealth, we think that is blessing. We tie blessings to that. When more often than not, those are the curses, and the pains are usually, more often than not, for the Christian, the biggest blessings ever. It's what produces gratitude toward God. It's what produces thankfulness. It's what produces a more tighter relationship between you and God when you're going through hardships. You don't have to focus on what you're going to spend your money on. You got plenty of time to think when you're going through a hardship. Mariah, go ahead.
Just kind of wanted to back you up because you said, you believe that this is the case, but it is because when he's speaking about the hedge, it was Satan that brought up the hedge that he had. And he says, it's about him and his house and about everything that he has on every side. Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance has increased in the land. So that's what he calls or thinks that is a blessing, and not the life that is given and preserved,
Right.
Through the relationship that God has given us.
Right. And so, yeah, and I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but you're sure that it was, because I'm pretty sure, and that's why I said it, that Satan was the one that mentioned the hedge. It wasn't God that mentioned the hedge, right? Is that true?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So, and so when you go into that text, like so many people do, it's always thought of that God is the one who talked about the hedge, but it was Satan who talked about the hedge. And it was God who's the one that said, try my servant Job. Satan didn't say that. God said that. And so he God's word, he's showing us how things are. And he's telling us, and it's amazing to me how so many of us miss it. How many of us miss it? But when you read it like we're doing right now, it's just so rich. You can see why, I hope anyway, why I wanted to take longer, because I felt that it would be hard for me to really express my entire mind on this one verse, because it's rare that you can take one verse and just go so many different directions from it. But I hope that so far it's being a blessing to your soul, as it is to me when I was going through it and decided I need to have one session committed. I want to get through Job, I really do, but this is one verse that I think we needed to marinate a little bit on, because we spend a lot of time having doctrinal discussions and all that kind of thing. And I think it's important that we really deal with a lot of these practical themes, because this is what really makes you strong in the faith. It really does when you get it. And so what Job is pointing out here is simply this, that a long life itself, a long life alone cannot be taken to be a certain sign of God's favor. And this observation teaches that the measure of a man's years is not a sure indicator of his spiritual state. How long you live has nothing to do with you being right with God. With you having a lot of stuff has no indication whatsoever that you have merited righteousness with God. Has nothing to do with it at all. There are some who fear God who die young, while some who despise him live to the oldest of ages. Candy, go ahead.
So I see it now where it's his faith. And faith is given by God.
Right.
It is him who gives it, and a hedge was around. And that's what Satan wants him to do, is curse God and lose his faith, which is for any of us. He wants us to doubt and not have the belief in God that we do. But God knows different. And I typed it in the chat, and then Brother Pat came in behind me and sort of said it too. And that's the beauty of what we see in Job, is that when we are tested and going through these fires, it's because God is giving Satan the benefit of the doubt to try, but his success is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Just like with Jesus, and we see, it's the faith of him. And that's what our hedge is around. But I also see the eternal security in no matter what we go through in the flesh on this earth, we are secure. No one can pluck us out of his hand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No one can pluck us out of his hand. Beautiful. That's for sure. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. Yeah. So now Job amps it up again. The third part of the question. Yeah, the mighty or the wicked become mighty in power. So not only do they live, not only do they grow old, but they often grow powerful. Become powerful people. Their strength increases rather than shrinks. They gain influence, they gain wealth, they gain authority, and they gain honor among men. Great money, lots of money, lots of estates, homes, political authority, ruling over others, social influence and reputation, physical vigor, and worldly success. We have a lot of those types of people in America. Richest planet on the earth, one of the richest kingdoms ever. Look at what's happening with the people in power in this country. They can't get enough. They are greedy vultures, wicked human beings, thriving on power, money, killing people. This is what humans do. This is what they do. No regard for God, no regard for life. And instead of being visibly weakened by divine judgment, they seem to flourish. They seem to flourish. I know one thing, our current president, he's definitely at this point in the game, he's winning. By worldly standards, he's winning. America's not, but he is. Make no mistake about it. That man is winning. And you cannot look at him and go, this is God's doing. We know it's God's doing, but I mean, many Christians have taken it to be, he must be sent by God. He's a godly man. He's going to save us. I'm only saying what I've actually heard. You got people worshiping this dude. I mean, worshiping, literally worshiping. And so, to each his own. Like Joshua said, of all those gods out there, you pick and choose whichever one you want. But me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. But I'm pointing out how much a person has. Power, money, family, control, go anywhere, say anything. Think about it. This man's campaign started off by saying, I can shoot somebody on the street and not have to pay a dime for it. And so to get around dealing with that issue, every time the man says something stupid, we just go, oh, he's just being tongue-in-cheek. He's just being a guy. Every idle word. Every idle word. But see, this is what power does to you. It makes you drunk. Power, wealth, all of that kind of stuff. Know this, that for the unrepentant man, that the end is definitely coming soon. It's coming soon. We need to be aware of what's happening and be able to seize the opportunity to make an impact if we have the good fortune to meet somebody in this state. Prosperity grows while the righteous suffer affliction. And this is just the way it's always happened. It's the way it's always happened. And this observation intensifies the difficulty that is being presented here. Job is making an outstanding argument to his friends. If wickedness necessarily brought in swift ruin, then such growth in power couldn't occur. In other words, if Job's friends, if what they argued about him, that when a wicked man accumulates prosperity like that, like Job did, he's going to be cut off swiftly. In the case that Job is making, how can that be true? Because if that's true, then there could be no way that the wicked could prosper as much as they do. So he's making an argument to them that there's barely any room to rebut. But we'll see what they say when the time comes. But the force of Job's question lies in this. It lies in this challenge to overly simplify God's providence. And that's what his friends do. They try to just simplify it. This is what happened. This is what's going on with you, and this is the result. That's the equation. But they take it backwards. They look at the outcome, the end of it, and go and backdoor it from there. It's like, well, you lost everything. Therefore, that means you're wicked. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. Sister Mariah, go ahead.
Yeah. While you were talking, I wanted to ask, because when the wheat and the tares, they grow up together, they look the same. And so likewise, is this something that, because people think that when you are receiving such things that you're prospering, that God has blessed this, and likewise the opposite. But I think Job obviously is making a very different case that separates the wheat from the tares and showing that kind of distinction. Could you say such a thing?
That well, hold on, say it again. I'm missing a part of it. I got a brain hiccup right now. Say it again.
Hold on, I have an airplane going by, but that the wheat and the tares, right, when they grow up together, they look the same,
Right.
right?
Right.
That you cannot tell one another them apart. So as this can be a reason as to why Job's friends are confusing him to be wicked, because, you know, they grow up the same. And if you're blessed or you're giving things, you're prospering and God has blessed you. And if it's taken away, then you are being cursed or sin or something. But it's almost the same. And this is why he's questioning to them that, how is it so? How is it so that the wicked prosper then? Could you compare such a thing?
You can compare it in this regard. You could definitely compare it, and you can compare it in this regard, which is that we know that the wheat is good and the tares are not. We know that the tares, like you said, the wheat and the tares, they look alike. It's not until they come to full growth, till harvest, when you're able to make the difference. And that's where the separation can be made adequately without harming the wheat. So where I think this really fits into what we're talking about is the fact that so the parameters for our existence has nothing to do, is not carved out based on whether or not we are wicked or not. In other words, there are things that God is going to do in our lives, which may be things that may on the outside look like something that the wicked deserve. And the flip side of that, meaning that we always understand, because people always ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? You know, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, we can also ask the same question the other way around. Why do good things happen to bad people? And I think that what you're bringing up with the wheat and the tares is a sort of explanation for it. Let them grow together. And age, how long you live, for example, or how wealthy you are, or whatever, has nothing to do with your spiritual status. It has everything to do with the way God has ordered his creation under his providential control to carry out those things which glorify him and those things which are for the good and blessing and benefit of his people. And so it's a long way around. But the whole point is the appointment for our end is not predicated upon our spiritual standing. Righteous people, like I said earlier, righteous people, many of them die at young ages. Wicked people live long lives and can be prosperous and wealthy and never have a hardship in their life until the very day that they shut their eyes here on earth. So I hope it answers the question a little bit, but I do think that there's a good application to be made between the wheat and the tares on this subject. I think it's a very good one. But Job's friends, this is how they reasoned. They reasoned that the righteous are the ones who prosper. The wicked are the ones who suffer. Therefore, extraordinary suffering must prove extraordinary wickedness. This is the case they're making to Job. But real evidence of life contradicts this sort of rigid approach and rigid understanding. And these guys are all like that. They're very rigid, orthodox, works type people. So many wicked people prosper. They live long lives. They gain great power. Therefore, suffering alone cannot be used as certain proof of hidden sin. This is what Job is trying to make them understand. At the end of the day, it all comes down to making an inward judgment about a person based on what they see on the outside. And it's the same thing that humans do today. It hasn't changed. We judge everything based on earthly, worldly, carnal success. If you have stuff, you must be blessed. And even when we go to somebody's house they have a nice home and cars and the pools and the cabanas and all that kind of stuff. And when you go over there and you tell them, you know what, man, you sure are blessed. And they are. They are. But Christians see things, we have to see things differently, especially when they happen to us. You know, we should, based on what we know in the scriptures, we should really draw closer to the Lord than we ever have if he ever gave you the kinds of things that the world wants. If he gave you that wealth, gives you that that mansion you've been asking for, gives you the cars you want, give you the G5 plane and all that stuff, the yacht, you get all that kind of stuff. That's when things get bad. That's when things get bad. And if you've been around wealthy people, super wealthy people, if you ever got a chance to be around some of them, you will understand that some of their greatest disappointments, hardships in their life for a rich person is not upsetting the apple cart of the wealthy. And what I mean by that is like when you achieve a certain amount of wealth, you don't get to do what you want, contrary to what people think. You get to do the fun stuff that people want. But what I'm saying is you can only go so far, because when you reach a certain level of wealth and power and success, now you live in a different world amongst the other rich, amongst those other people. And they collectively control things. So what one person can do to a stock market is insane. So you now end up having to report to other wealthy people, how are you going to manage your wealth so that it doesn't upset everybody else's? It's kind of crazy. But I've had the good fortune of knowing some people like this. And you'd be surprised at how little freedom they actually have. Yeah, they can go to, get on a plane and fly somewhere and whatever, but they can't just sell off certain types of stock. They can't just go buy certain types of things. They can't go buy this amount. In other words, they function within parameters in that group. The freedom that you think they have, they don't have. And when you add to that they don't know the Lord, it's even worse. It's even worse. But, if that's what you're asking for, the old saying holds true. Be careful what you ask for. Be careful. And if God blesses you with that kind of thing, then cling even closer to him, more so than you ever have, because you will need it. You will need it. And so, almost done here. So, this verse really, it points to a really profound truth in my mind. And that's that God's government of the world cannot always be measured by present appearances. And I know I've said it over and over again, but I want to bring that point home. Looking at things on the outside, especially when it's a brother or sister who's going through a hard time, do your best not to judge by what you see. Not to judge by what you see. Sit down with that brother or sister and talk to them. And just say, how is it with your soul? I see all the things that are going wrong. I see, you lost the house. I see you lost the car. I see your relationship with your husband or your wife is broken apart. Your kids are gone. You're not talking anymore. Whatever it may be. The first thing for me that I would like to hear somebody say to me in that situation is to come to visit me, seeing that everything that has gone wrong for me by the world standards, and just ask me, how is it with my soul? How is my walk with the Lord? And then trust my answer. Trust my answer. And then we talk about all the other things. But let a person know that your concern is ultimately about their soul's state, not about the losses. Those things can be given and taken away. But you got one soul in which you have to give an account to God. And we should be concerned about other people's souls, which is what we're supposed to do. Which is what we're supposed to do. Somebody says, TJ Davis, I guess he's been saying a lot of things, and that's fine. He goes, that goes without saying. It's so weird how many people say things like that. That goes without saying. But how many lessons, how many of the same lessons have we had to learn over and over and over again in the Word of God? It should go without saying. But if that were true, then we wouldn't have needed a Bible. We needed a Bible because the things that pertain to the truth, it doesn't go without saying. It has to be told to us. And we have to embrace it. And it has to sink down into the very fiber of our being. And even then, we still find ourselves having to be reminded of these things. And you're right. Just being there is important. Just being there with people. And so, yeah. So this is a good one. And I think that Job brings out a very good point. And I'm looking forward to going past this verse starting tomorrow and seeing what he's going to continue to say, to add and to compound on this argument that he's been making.